DRPT there. Amy asked me to make that point and distinction, so I wanted to make sure everybody understood they were not there, but I am in close contact with Kevin and with Amy, and we'll bring them back in the fold. Kevin Page, as late as yesterday, indicated that he believes a fair amount of the scope that's still on the table, even with the revised scope, is a duplication of effort. We were not aware, staff was not aware of some of the things that are going on at DRBT. So I talked to Amy this morning at the break, and Amy's assured me we're gonna be able to get a full disclosure of what they're doing, what their consultant is doing. My plan is this: if you give me authorization to continue to negotiate on this thing, that is with the price and the scope, my next immediate action will bring DRPT to the table with Dr. Metcalf and his team and the steering committee, and we're going to find out who's doing what and who's paying for what, and I'm hoping we can trim the scope and trim the price further. If we get a favorable response from that meeting, Dr. Metcalf has agreed that he would appear here. I'm not sure if he's going to bring his entire team, but he'll be here for the February 10th retreat, and we'll present the revised scope and revised price at that point and allow you to interact directly with that consulting team to find out if the scope is acceptable and if the funding proposal that they have proposed is acceptable.
Well, two things come to my mind, if I may. The first one, why haven't we had this communication ongoing? I mean, with what's going on, I mean.
With DRPT?
Yeah.
I don't know. I honestly don't know why we have not received that information until yesterday. Like I say, I don't, I've got to get some answers, but the first call I got regarding the scope, because the RFP has been out for how long? Since when? Since October. And we didn't realize we were going down a path that would represent it. So I got the call late yesterday indicating, for the first time in my knowledge, that it had been duplicated. I think we can iron through that. And a lot of what they're indicating as of yesterday that they're doing, a lot of that's in the scope, and we certainly don't need to create two consultants doing service development plans.
Well,
so.
I certainly don't argue that point at all. I agree with that, but there's something that's critical and big to our region, and we're just getting this information now. It concerns me.
It concerns me also.
Secondly, I want to make sure we do this thing right. And, if you're and I think he's recommending, and I accept what he's saying, I think we should adjust that to up to $180,000, not to exceed $180,000. Is that what you're looking for?
Well, I'm saying if we're down to that, I can do that within our budget, but I still want you folks to understand what's in that scope.
Well, absolutely.
And what we're taking out of your budget to spend on this consulting work, and we're going to get a clear indication, as I told Kevin yesterday and I told Amy this morning, I need a clear indication, a full disclosure of what they and their consultants are doing so that we absolutely don't duplicate any of this work.
I totally agree. Okay.
I would support the recommendation that Dwight be authorized to continue to negotiate the price downward and the scope of the work that does not conflict with work that's already been done by the rail unit at the contract.
Is that a motion?
But not make a commitment to hiring the guy until we have the further presentation on February 10th.
On February 10th.
Well, second, if I could.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I want to come back to what Mayor Krasnoff said. Time is not our friend. And you're going to now take another month to negotiate this when we don't have that sort of time. To do this. If you're going to negotiate and bring it back to us in a month, and then we're going to decide again, whether we're going to take another month to do this. And is the Department of Rail and Public Transit going to, add something else in a month at the last moment again? And the truth, and I wasn't the person who requested this study to begin with, even though I completely agree with it, but I thought the request was notion to represent the Hampton Roads region. This is a state agency, and I don't want to duplicate what they're saying, but they have a whole different perspective on this than what we're trying to do just as a region. They represent the state, the entire Commonwealth, and I'm not saying that you're not acting, please, but there's an urgency here that we got to catch up with people out of Northern Virginia and the Richmond communities that are already there. And we all know Kevin is overworked tremendously, and you know, just looking at the draft EIS, quite frankly, in our opinion, at least from the Norfolk perspective, there are any number, I mean, the information is dated, a lot of it, I mean, it's not in keeping with what we think some of the federal regs require. I mean, there are big holes in this thing, which we'll point out in printed comments, and then we'll have other, you know, public things. But there's an urgency here to wait for another month to do this, when we've got the guys sitting here ready to go, which at a minimum we could, I mean, I'm prepared to let Dwight strike the deal, taking everything that we've said into consideration, and then, you know, pull the trigger and let the consultant start working for us. I'm glad for him to review the you know, what you've already produced and what Kevin has produced, but I'm, you know, quite frankly, I mean, I'm skeptical of some of it.
Well, with all due respect, we do have a process that is unfolding, and, you know, would like to have the opportunity to allow that to unfold. We're currently in the public process with this environmental document, and frankly, for, you know, for another study to then come and look like it's a parallel process doesn't really behoove anyone. So
I don't know that
we would like
that's
to allow our process to unfold as it is, and I'm, you know, and not to have duplicate work happening here, but to, you know, in essence, work with us to come up with the alternative, with the alignment, and to understand from the region's perspective where your connectivity is, where your stations are going to be, how you're going to fund those things, and to work together in that manner. But to let our environmental process unfold as it has been. We've been working with FRA. They've reviewed the document. They've allowed us to put it out for public comment. So we, you know, we'll respectfully would like to receive your comments on that.
Well, maybe, I mean, we're talking past each other. I wouldn't for a moment interrupt the process that you already have in place. I mean, this is for someone to come to advise this body, you know, of, you know, how we ought to proceed in the future in tandem with you. But your public hearings are scheduled. They're ready to move forward. If we got Thames on board tomorrow, I don't think they would be prepared to offer us any information that we could provide to you at this point. I'm just afraid what I'm hearing is at the last moment there's been, you know, that, you know, the Department of Rail and Public Transit has said, well, we're doing some of this, don't you guys do it? This is so important to us.
We understand.
As a region, it is so important that we have the best advice and we have the most timely advice and we get moving on this thing, because we are way behind the rest of the state, from Northern Virginia to Richmond. That, you know, time is our energy, is our enemy here, and we need to get moving. And
Mayor Frank, would you object to it not having come back for our approval and letting Dwight go up to $180,000?
I mean, if that's what everybody wants to do, I'll certainly acquiesce. I certainly respect what Mayor Frame is saying, and the points he makes are good points. Timing is important. You know, we need to get on top of this thing, clearly. The amount of money that I thought we were going to be talking about when we talked about hiring a consultant wasn't anything like $180,000, leave alone $320,000. The fact that we can cover this in the budget without going back to the communities and asking for supplemental funding is some help, because I don't know that any of us, certainly I couldn't, get supplemental funding for this in this budget environment, and I assume others are in a similar posture. I'm concerned about what we're engaging this firm to do, because in reading the scope of work that's in the request for proposal, it appears to me there's a huge amount of duplication of work that's already been done. I mean, these projects have been studied and studied. Where we are really is not the technical part of it. I think the technical issues are pretty well understood. What we really need is the political piece. We need to get the action on funding. Make sure that we're approaching that properly, make sure the right people are engaged to ensure that we're going to not get left out in the funding process, so that this process can go ahead. And assume, Paul, you would agree that that's really where we have to be. So having said that, you know, if everybody else is okay and letting Dwight move this forward to a contract with those caveats in place, I think I can agree.
Thank you very much.
Can I just, Joe, obviously I think you're right on point about the political piece and how we go get the money, which is, you know, the most important thing. But if you speak to Mr. Metcalf, Alex Metcalf, the guy who does this.
Which I have not.
I mean, there are worlds of information that he has available that is not in this EIS, this draft that's come out about how we need to proceed. I mean, he has a roadmap in here how other communities across the country have done this. And we don't have that. And we can go running off and get the money, but we don't know how to first.
Well,
am I right, Dwight? You want to?
I will. The point that I left out here was that having gone through the interview process with these folks, I can't emphasize more than what Mayor Frame has said. These people are very impressive. Amy, with no disrespect to DRPT, they're on a slightly different page. I think the way Dr. Metcalf puts this is he believes he can strengthen the material significantly that's in the draft EIS. That's why I want to get these folks together. So while there appears to be some duplication, if we can substantially strengthen that proposal and DRBT agrees that we are strengthening the proposal, then it gets at increasing our competitiveness nationwide for the funding that comes down.
Well,
Bruce?
As the scope currently reads, it's very technical in nature, and it does appear that what this firm would be doing would be duplicating efforts. So, you know, we want to be clear in that we have no desire to have a parallel process or to encourage that, because we do have a federal process currently underway. So to have that happen could be somewhat detrimental.
Before I accept being the point of second, you know, I heard the comment that we're way behind Northern Virginia and Richmond, but I haven't heard any discussion of what was done in the other regions. And I would hate for this board to approve this today without knowing exactly what the scope is. I hear what Ms. Ingram is saying about this is duplication of effort on some of the technical issues, and I certainly in these times wouldn't support hiring a consultant to do duplication of effort. And so Dwight, can you help me? What are the other regions doing? Do we know?
Well, the one major apparent duplication of effort is that Dr. Metcalf and his team want to do these two separate service development plans because there really are apples and oranges, high-speed rail, intercity passenger. Kevin, as of yesterday, certainly pointed that out. But I believe that we can get some service development plan elements that will differ from what DRPT and I think you, Amy, you have a consultant on the contract.
We do.
You know, that the outcome from those are going to be different, and Dr. Metcalf has portrayed them as he's going to find you the optimal solutions to those plans that increase your competitiveness in his mind significantly. Again, there may be disagreement from DRBT, but I'd like to hear what those differences are. I'd like to hear what he proposes as what the strengthening is, and I have to go on his track record. He has been a part of a team to deliver both Portland and Boston to implementation, and he indicates his team is part of a team that's going to about to deliver Duluth. So this guy actually delivers, according to the information I've received, actually delivers ribbon cutting. So he thinks he can do the same for us, and he thinks he can strengthen significantly the proposal that's currently on the table. But I do want to have that conversation with DRBT to find out if there are some opposing views.
And the other regions, are they having consultants?
No. To my knowledge, Richmond does not. I think DRBT is.
So we're not behind the other regions. We're just the comment that was made earlier was that we're just behind the state process.
Well, the other regions, for whatever reason, Mr. Goodson, are ahead of us due to, I think, in part, the work done by the state. So I think what Mayor Frame is saying is we need to catch up with the rest of the state. Dr. Metcalf has made it clear to me and the steering committee He thinks he can strengthen the extension even down to Richmond Petersburg by bringing a stronger Hampton Roads online, and he can make that case, and he is confident FRA will recognize it as materially different than what we've got now.
Gene?
Yeah, well, I heard the staff recommendation as allowing the executive director to continue negotiations and bringing it back to us on February 10th, which is 3 weeks. And so my question is, Dwight, to you, what's the big risk of a not even probably 3-week delay, because it's going to take you some of that 3 weeks to negotiate? Is there a big risk to us to wait until then, when we would have the benefit of knowing what you negotiated and what we're trading off by
Time is getting
way?
very critically important here. What my plan was to accommodate some of the concerns is to have the draft final scope ready in hand for you to see on the 10th or before, to have him appear with the scope and the price and be ready to sign a contract literally that day or the next day, pending your review and approval. And I think if we get underway under the contract on that day, while we slipped a little bit, I think that we can get ourselves back online. But I do want you all to be comfortable that you are going to get good value for the money, and that in fact these folks are the ones that can make it happen.
Joe?
One of the problems, of course, is that you have seen the proposal, and we haven't. And Mayor Frame apparently has some engagement with this firm and experience with them, which we haven't. And so my concern is only that we need to do this. I don't think there's any question we need to have the advice that we can get. The question I have is the scope which informs the cost overbroad that is a duplication? And I think we need to define that. We talked about that. I don't need to repeat all that. But if we're not going to be delayed, I'd be more comfortable of knowing what it was I was voting for than not. But if the point that Mayor Frame made is that time difference is going to be material and set us back, then I guess I'm willing to risk the effort you'd make, Dwight, which I have confidence in, that you'd go through all of that stuff and reduce the cost to what you can, making sure that the scope is not redundant, and making sure the scope gives us what we need to have in terms of outcomes.
Bruce, are you okay with that?
No, I'm not really. I need to get a second somewhere else.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. We've got a motion, second.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment here. The state, the Commonwealth, we do have arrangements with Amtrak. We have been doing service planning in consultation with them and with the freight railroads. So, in terms of our service plan development, that will be refined as the process moves forward. As the project furthers in development, that's just how these things work. So, to the extent that you feel that there needs to be additional service plans developed outside of our process, I'm not sure about that or what the need for that would be.
All right. Any other comments? Great comments, I might add. We'll call for the question.
Can you repeat the motion?
Repeat the motion, Dwight.
Can we keep punting here? I was going to ask Mayor Frank.
We're going to go up to $180,000, not to exceed $180,000, and that the director is to do all the things that Joe said.
Go ahead, Dwight. I mean, it's,
The author, what I sense as a direction will be is that I'm going to continue to negotiate. I am going to call a meeting within the next week to 10 days max between DRBT, Dr. Metcalf, his team, and the steering committee. We're going to get at this duplication of effort. I think there will still be, Amy, duplication of effort in that we will have a professional disagreement on how to strengthen the service development plans and how to strengthen alternative one. I think that we can do that for no more than the price is actually $182,000, which is what I currently have in my hand. I think I can possibly get that down just a little bit further, and I don't have to come back to you folks for a surcharge. I think that once I get through, sort through the differences of what you all, Amy, have done and will do, and get Dr. Metcalf to agree he can complement that rather than duplicate that, then I think we should, Amy, have the right to at least make arguments for ourselves to strengthen it from where we sit as opposed to from where the state sits, and present that, in the outcome of this report.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
And the motion is going to allow us by February 11th to make public comments. Is that my understanding? 10th, is it?
Well, I plan to have him here in front of you to meet with him on the 10th. If you would like for me to hold on executing the agreement to the 10th.
No, I'm not holding, actually. I just want to make sure we get it done by a date of...
Oh, we will have all of this done, and you will have Dr. Metcalf, and I've invited DRPT to be present on the 10th, and so you all can have a full discussion. But I need to be clear as to whether you're authorizing me to execute so that he's under contract to be here and the meter will run.
I would question how someone could perform that amount of work for $180,000.
Well, he's not going to do all of the scope that's in here for the 320. He's going to extract out those critically important things that have to be done by the springtime frame, so we don't miss any of those critical dates that I think Mayor Frame was alluding to.
Okay.
So we don't really know what the scope of the contract we're voting on today.
I tell you what, Mr. Chairman, I can get copies made of the $182,000 effort handed out in the next 10 minutes, Kelly, if we can get them.
I think we've got to have faith in Dwight to be able to handle that.
We've historically allowed him to do.
All right, so is the motion that Dwight be authorized to do those things we talked about and execute a contract
Yes.
with this guy after he's satisfied the requirements we've outlined? Comply with?
Yes.
Is that the motion?
Are you
That's what
okay
I
with
said.
that? The motion and a second?
That's not my motion, I was just questioning whether that was the motion.
I thought you made the
No,
motion.
you
I'll
made
make
the
that
motion.
motion to permit Dwight to execute the contract.
That's the motion.
Yes,
We got a motion and a second, correct?
yes.
Any other discussion?
Just one, I have no idea what we're getting for $180,000, so I'm
Yeah.
not vote no, but I just don't understand what we're getting for $180,000.
Yeah, if I may,
Go right ahead.
would it be possible to identify what this new scope would be and provide that information to the board and then review that, have discussion, and then allow Mr. Farmer to enter in
That's
to an
exactly
agreement?
what we just said we weren't going to come back here. And I'm really distressed that you seem to be, I mean, first of all, that's not, we were trying to move the process further, more quickly. That's what the motion was and the second was. I'm really, I mean, just from my vantage point, it appears that the state wants to argue with us about doing this study, which we think is going to strengthen what's already out there. And Dwight has already said that you'll be sitting at the table to make sure that we don't duplicate what you've done and that we work in harmony. I mean, it can't do anything but help, in my opinion.
Again, we have a federal process that's currently underway. A duplicate process would be detrimental.
Okay. We have a motion, Joe, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, that has been made. We have a second. Any other comments?
I just thought, I heard a word that just piqued my interest. Could you repeat that word in white and expound on that?
Pardon me?
You said the word detrimental?
Correct. If again, we want to see that there's harmony here between our process and what's happening here, and having a parallel process unfold as our process is unfolding doesn't communicate that. So we just want to, we want to sit down and work with you all and make sure that everyone's understanding what has gone into our process, certainly. But again, we just want to make it clear that our intent is not to withhold any information, and certainly not to have this region duplicating the work that we've been doing. And I understand that Mr. Farmer will go back and refine the scope in consultation with DRPT, and we'll concur with that. I just, in hearing other comments from the board members, not knowing what that new scope would be and entering into that contract, it sounds like there's just some question about that.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I think what we're looking for is advice. I think we're looking for this company, this consulting, to walk us through the process. We're not looking to replicate what you all are doing, or stop what you're doing, or slow down, or interfere in any way with what you're doing. What you're doing needs to be done. It needs to be done to meet all of the federal regulatory requirements, funding requirements. We understand all that. And so I think what you need to understand and believe is what we're trying to do here is get advice that's focused on the specific needs of the high-speed rail on the south side of the James River, the enhanced rail on the peninsula side, and how we as an organization can work most effectively to move those two projects forward. That's what we're looking for. How we get there, we're looking for advice as to how to get there. That's not in conflict with anything that you're doing, which I think I'm pretty familiar with. So I think that's why I'm comfortable in supporting the approach that we take in here today.
Certainly, and we would concur with that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
No.
Have you got those noted?
Do you want to do a roll call, Mr. Chairman?
We'll do a roll call. Go ahead.
Let's go down here. Mayor Krasnoff.
Yes.
I need do we have someone here from Gloucester? Mayor Ward?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
No.
Mr. Goodson?
No.
Mayor Frank?
Yes?
Mayor Frame?
Yes.
Mr. Wheeler?
Mr. Helson's here.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Helson. Mr. Smith?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. What's up? Okay. Mayor
Yes.
Sessoms? Mayor Zeidler?
No.
Mr. McReynolds?
Yes.
And we do we have HRT here as a voting member, and Williamsburg Area Transport here?
Yes. No, vote is no.
Vote is no. Okay, I believe I have covered everything.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry, VDOT, Mr. Huer, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
You got Mr. Bridges, right?
And HRTPO.
Don't
Amy?
abstain.
Abstain?
Yep, Jerry.
Is Jerry's? Yes, VPA, so it's a yes from VPA.
Thank you all very much. Are we concluded the vote?
Yes.
All right.
You never know who wins at this stuff.
All right. Let's go to item number 9.
You don't have a flash. Carries.
We go through item number 9.
Yes, I think we're going to have Mr. Huer. Dennis, are you prepared to go ahead and pick this one up?
Mr. Chairman, on number
Dennis,
9,
if you could.
I guess the Dr. Farmer and put off the substitute motion that was in the agenda, no handout. The whole purpose of this is that the resolution as proposed requires an action placed on each municipality at the deadline date. And knowing that you have council meetings, you have board of supervisors meetings and such, that puts in jeopardy any potential benefit from this resolution of transferring money to another project. The fallback position has been identified as a Princess Anne. So I'm just simply requesting the substitute motion say that if the 100% plans and specifications are not submitted by the deadline date of February 2nd, that automatically triggers the reversion to the substitute project.
Moved option.
Got a motion to have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Item number
We have
10.
a roll call vote on that.
Item number 10, I believe that Legislative Ad Hoc Committee, Doug,
Yeah, I'm going to do the three committee updates. I think I can do them reasonably quickly.
You'd be my hero.
Legislative Committee, the Nominating Committee, and the Trade Transportation Committee. First, the Legislative Ad Hoc Committee had our first meeting on January 4th. Frankly, we came in talking about legislation and some thoughts on what to do in this current session, and at the behest of Senator Miller and Delegate Cosgrove, who said, frankly, at this point in time, most of us have submitted legislation. You're late to begin anything in this session. We sort of backed up and said, let's talk about process going forward and the things that we ought to be doing generally, but also more specifically for the next session. So in that process conversation, you'll see we really started talking about, all right, what's the mission of this group? What's the criteria that it's going to be that we would recommend for actively engaging in discourse with the legislature and trying to get legislation? And then maybe most importantly was really when we started with what's the conversation, what's the timeline, when should we be meeting in this process, and how soon should stuff be coming before this body to get in front of the caucus to get effect. And so what you'll see is the mission. You've got a handout at your table today that's a little more specific than was in our packet. But I won't read to, but the mission is basically what's laid out here: to support legislation that has overwhelming support from the board, to educate the General Assembly members regarding the region's challenge. What that really means is that, a little bit of what we said earlier, that the rest of the region doesn't really understand or appreciate our vulnerabilities and some of the challenges that we've got with these bridges and tunnels and other issues. We feel like we need to help educate that, and then optimize the strengths of the region. And we think at the moment, and it's whatever the strengths are at that point in time, at the moment our strengths are that we've got, frankly, a governor from Virginia Beach that hopefully understands the issues here, that he has stated that 460 is his priority project, and there's a lot of energy around that, and that's certainly an important project for us, and that high-speed rail right now is truly possible, and we want to be doing everything we can to make that happen. On the criteria piece, really things that, and these are pretty straightforward, things that have regional impacts, things that improve our region and our state's competitiveness, represent a change in the way Virginia does business, and then again this idea of an overwhelming consensus of the board. And we had a lot of conversation about this, of sort of that versus the sort of universal support for TPO decisions. And the committee said, if we're going to be going to the General Assembly advocating, then it ought to be for things that have strong support from the full board, as opposed to having us up there sort of competing with localities. That's the criteria. And I'll come back, we're going to vote on each of these items. In terms of the legislative recommendations, a lot of conversation we've had obviously recently about the Commonwealth Transportation Board and that process and the changes, the revisions to the 6-year improvement plan. We frankly, with the support of Senator Miller and Delegate Cosgrove, really feel like the representation for this region at the CTB is not adequate, and would advocate an additional seat on the Commonwealth Transportation Board. And then the other piece is Delegate Cosgrove and Senator Miller each discussed introducing bills that would establish a commission to study the expansion of high-speed intercity passenger rail in the Commonwealth. And the important bullet here is, and determine a sustainable funding mechanism. And the committee felt like we should support that action. And then the item C3 is just a tweak that Dwight wanted us to make to the language around the Rail Enhancement Fund, and to ask the General Assembly to add, and you can see in your handout that matching money with the Rail Enhancement Fund today is required to come from very specific places, and you can see what they are, private sources and whatnot. We're asking that we add federal dollars could actually be the match for that Rail Enhancement Fund. And then item D, and I'll spend a moment on, you'll see is this issue of timeline. And what we try to say is, all right, in order to get ready for 2011, what should we be doing? And Delegate Cosgrove and Senator Miller really helped us here. It's really our committee ought to be meeting in that April-May time frame, saying, all right, what are we doing to get ready for the next session? What are the priorities that we're going to have? Get back together in June, July, start to finalize that, and bring a recommendation to this board in September that allows the caucus and frankly the members of this commission that are in the General Assembly to have a real good sense of where we're going by the fall, by September. I think, and Stan help me with this, I think there was also one item that they recommended that ought to be in here, is that we ought to have actually a check-in with the caucus at crossover during the session. during the session, as bills cross over, all right, where are we, and is there any help they need from us, or what we're doing? I don't think they got any, but I think that was...
They actually wanted us in Richmond.
Right, that day.
Are you adding that now, Doug?
Yes, I am. And that is, so, what that entails then is, and I think we're going to take them, Dwight, I think you've got it set up to take them individually as first the mission, the criteria, the legislative recommendations that we're putting before you all as, and the process recommendation that we're putting before you all for approval.
You want to go ahead and make a
So I would
motion?
submit those as a motion. And hope.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Thank you very much.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I'll take the nominating committee. Pretty straightforward. We put the names in front of you last month, and there was some conversation that felt like, given that this was a citizen committee, we wanted those names to be public for full 30 days, let folks see them if there was comment, to have an opportunity to provide that comment. Since that meeting, we have added one name, and that name is, that we would put before you today, is Chappelle Watkins White from Chesapeake. You can look at the list. You'll remember we've staggered these terms just in alphabetical order by city, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year terms that are set up. Senator Miller, you'll recall in our, I can't think what today is, 2 meetings back, had really had some conversation about, I want to really understand what the demographics look like of this committee. We think if you look at attachment 10B, the statistical summary, we think we've done a very appropriate job with race, with gender, certainly with geography. We've got a couple slots we still need to fill. Age has probably been the toughest part, is getting some young folks on here, but we're putting 26 names before you. We've got 4 slots remaining. Our goal would be particularly to fill those slots with younger female. That's what we're looking for at this point. But beyond that, we think we've done an appropriate job on the demographic mix-up. So with that said, I would put those names, submit those names for you for approval today.
Dennis?
Just a correction here. The name for Prescott Sherrod, they're reversed, and Sherrod is the last name with 2 R's. Prescott is his first name.
Thank you for that correction. Any other, we have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? I will be placing a chairman, but I want to contact the individual before I announce the person, make sure they want to do it. I want to make sure these things were approved first. Thank you very much.
All right, the last committee, Mr. Chairman, is the Freight Transportation Committee. We had our first meeting on December 18th. You'll remember we appointed the names in the fall. Really, the focus of that meeting was getting everyone oriented on what we were trying to accomplish, but also adopting a set of bylaws. Those bylaws are in front of you. They deal with just exactly what you'd expect to, sort of what's the mission of the board, kind of what is their role that they're going to play, who makes up, what kind of folks are on this committee, the terms. You'll remember there'll be a chair from this board, which at the moment is me. There'll be a co-chair, which will be one of the other 8 members, and we talked about what it takes to get a quorum and the importance of attendance and that sort of thing. So the bylaws, I think, are pretty straightforward, but that is actually the item before this board, is to approve the bylaws of the FTAC this morning.
Thank you very much
I
for your...
make that as a motion.
Yeah. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Very good. We're going to have to digress, if I could. On the last vote, Dwight is informing there wasn't a majority. So if you would explain why.
We didn't, we have the 3 tiers in the MPO voting. Under the percent of population represented, we have 87% voting yes. On the percent of locality members in attendance, we need 60. We had 72.7%. But for a simple majority, since we have a number of folks who are not here, we only attained 45% because I just discovered that Mr. McReynolds is not a voting member. He is a CAO non-voting member. So without his yes vote, we're 1 vote short of passing the test of simple majority of all board members, again, because of the number of people who are absent today.
Is there anyone
Mr.
kind
Chairman,
enough?
I'll be willing to change,
Okay,
change my
we got
vote.
it.
But I want to make a statement, that I wish that we could try to gain consensus at some, on some of these issues that some of us are very concerned about. And I feel like the three, as the mayor said earlier, Mayor Zeller said earlier, 3 weeks, when you're looking at maybe a couple weeks for negotiation anyway, you were looking maybe at a 1-week delay at the most, when this board has not seen what this consultant will be doing. We don't have an understanding. We're hearing some issues with the state on this. And so there's some real questions with this motion, and while for a 1-week delay, we would make a motion that some of us are uncomfortable with. That is my point, and so I don't want to delay this any further, and I'll reverse my vote if it'll move forward. But I am fairly concerned that we didn't try to get a consensus with the group today.
Thank
on
you.
that.
Thank you for your change, and Jeannie, I believe you did the change, so we do have a change of those votes, okay? Thank you all very much.
Mr. Rickard said he'll change his too, I think.
Okay. Thank you very much, all very kind to do so.
May I?
Okay.
Paul, did you?
No,
Mayor Frame?
just one comment, and I appreciate what Mr. Goodson has said. Knowing how this group works from time to time, I mean, by the time you get to the next meeting, and somebody didn't like what it was done then, and then you push these things on, bureaucracies have a way of not coming to grips with these sort of things. And the RFP's been out there for months, and I know it was, I think I remember saying, and I don't want to argue the point, it's already, but when the original budget of $50,000 came in here, I think I said at this table, we will never get what we want for that amount of money for something this important. I did say that, so, and maybe you and I will not agree on it, but I mean, we are very much behind when I say the rest of when the governor comes out or says the chief prior of the Commonwealth is from Northern Virginia to Richmond, Petersburg, and they don't have a second priority right now. We have a lot of work to do, in my opinion. So.
Thank you for your comments. You have for your information in there, any issues there? Any old business?
Let me ask one question. I don't want to belabor the moment, but can I ask a question about the retreat?
Yes.
How many hours have we set aside for the retreat?
We've established a 9:30 to 11:30 PDC slot, and 11:30 to 1:30, probably 2 for the TPO slot with lunch. I've got 5 items, including training, that right now I think is probably about all that you guys can stand, or we can pack into that 2 hours. And included in that is a half-an-hour slot for Dr. Metcalf, DRPT, for you all to have a roundtable discussion, and I plan to deliver a scope, the scope of work and the cost. And then the proposed budget for FY11. That'll be the critical one, because that's where, if in fact Dr. Metcalf and DRBT and your staff agree, FY11 is really going to have the bigger component, Amy. We're going to embark on some long-range planning things and some further strengthening, and we're going to do that probably May or June. So we'll talk about it February 10th. So 11:30 with lunch. Plan on at least 1:30, possibly 2.
Yeah.
February 10th. It's 1 week earlier than normal because there were huge conflicts on the normal meeting date for most of the board members.
The only thing that at some point we need to set aside some time, I think, for what Doug said. Because that is really, that sort of activity, we come to nice meetings here and we talk, and then none of us get engaged outside of this room at the regional level. So you just have got to make sure we get that back on the... I really want to commend Doug and the committee for the good work you're doing. I mean, it's really good stuff, I think.
Thank you, Doug, on behalf of the whole board.
But we got to get back.
Any old business? Any new business? Thank you all very much. Barely made it.